Welcome to Chess Dog, where players come to get better at chess. I'm John, and today we have a brief survey of the Marshall attack. Now, this opening is being played by Magnus Carlsen in the World Championship match with Nepomniachtchi. It's been his main defense to e4 to this point. And the Marshall attack is one of the best defenses in existence. It's a grandmaster level, World Championship level, elite grandmaster defensive system. It's not the same as the Marshall Gambit. That's a different opening. Both are named after Frank Marshall, but the Marshall Gambit is a d4, d5 opening, and the Marshall attack is an e-pawn gambit in the Spanish or Ruy Lopez opening. And what makes the Marshall Gambit such a great defensive system is that it's a vicious attack from black. For the cost of a pawn, black gets an incredibly strong attack. And here's the kicker. If white effectively defends against the attack, black is left with a very holdable, very drawable endgame. And that is not what you want with white, to be viciously attacked. And if you survive it, only be able to get a draw. But that is what the Marshall attack gives black, and it's a very, very effective opening. There is one problem with it, though. The biggest problem with it is that white has to be cooperative in order to get into it. White has to sort of meet you halfway. There are a lot of deviations on the way to the main line before you actually get that attack. Let's look at the position on the board. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop B5. First of all, white has to play the Ruy Lopez or Spanish opening in order for it to happen. Black plays A6, and white plays bishop to A4. So the exchange variation, taking the knight, would, of course, prevent the Marshall. Knight F6 castles, bishop E7, rook E1. There are other lines. White could play queen E2 or D3, B5, bishop to B3, and castles. Now, this is the red alert moment. Oftentimes in a mainline Spanish, black would just play D6 here. But by castling first, black is leaving open the option of playing D5, which is the Marshall attack. Now, what makes the Marshall attack possible? What gives it its potency is this move from white, C3. Now, C3 works well if the game is moving slowly and it's sort of a maneuvering game. But if the position opens up, C3 is not a very good move. You'll see here, first of all, it weakens these light squares for the white pieces, particularly the D3 square. It also is a pawn move instead of a moving of a piece, and it takes away the most natural development square for the knight at B1. That is why at that point D5 is often played, and the main line follows like this. Pawn takes, knight D5, knight E5, knight E5, rook E5, and these days C6 is the main move here. And now D4. And bishop to D6 is played, hitting the rook, kicking the rook away, and also aiming at the king. The rook goes back to E1, queen to H4, threatening queen to H2, which would be devastating. G3 blocks that threat, but now the light squares on the king side are weak, and the queen immediately penetrates on those squares, queen to H3. Bishop to E3, then bishop to G4, hitting the queen, queen to D3, rook A to E8, knight to D2, and rook to E6. This is sort of the starting point of the main attack of the Marshall. The rooks can double on the E file. Black can play F5, F4. Also, the rook at E6 can be played laterally, sort of like a rook lift. And black is very happy with this position. So let's go back and let's see what could white do instead. Well, instead of bishop to E3, white could play rook to E4. This was a move that white players were playing for a while, and this threatens a move like rook to H4 that kicks the queen out, and then white can play, say, bishop C2 and start to attack black. But then black discovered a little tactic. Black plays G5. That controls the H4 square, and if the pawn is taken, queen to F5 with a double attack, attacking the rook at E4 and the queen, the bishop at G5, and black would actually win a piece. So instead of rook E4, white, so let's go back to the old drawing board here, and decided at this move to try, instead of D4, D3 with this idea. Bishop d6, rook e1, queen h4. And if g3, queen h3, now rook e4. And if black plays g5 here, white can just take it, because after queen to f5, the rook at e4 is protected. That's the idea of playing d3 instead of d4. So this is one of the possible defenses or attack lines for white. So black said, okay, instead of playing queen to h4 here, I'll play bishop to f5 and control the square e4. And after something like queen f3, queen h4, g3, queen h3, we have a game. But as I mentioned, one of the problems for black in playing the Marshall attack is that white can decline it in so many different ways. Let's take a look. Because as soon as white sees that black is castled, instead of playing the pawn to d6, white knows that the Marshall attack is a possibility. So they can play a number of what are called anti-Marshall lines. One of the main anti-Marshall lines is the move h3. And the reason this works against the move d5, now d5 is still technically playable, but it's not as strong as it is in the main line, is because now the c3 pawn is the move c2, c3 has not been played. The knight at b1 can hop right into c3 and lend control to the d5 square. And that reduces the power of the d5 move from white. Another great thing about playing h3 is if black instead plays d6, then after c3 now, and you're in a mainline Spanish, and you've avoided the Marshall. So h3 is a very common anti-Marshall move. Another common anti-Marshall move is the move a4, setting up a threat of pawn takes pawn, and the a pawn would be pinned and on the a file, and black would just lose material. So black has three ways of dealing with this. They can first play rook to b8, stepping outside of the pin. Bishop to b7 is a move. Magnus plays this in the World Championship. That just defends the rook, so the rooks would just be traded. And then, of course, b4, bypassing the exchange altogether and gaining space on the queen side, but also gaining squares, but giving up some squares as well. Some more anti-Marshalls. d3 immediately is certainly possible. And also, white can go ahead and play d4 instead. So the Marshall is an incredible opening if you can get it. I hope you've enjoyed this brief survey, and join us again soon at Chess Talk. Goodbye.